this sort of spending my first 8 years, my biggest relation was the landscape. So it was we had fields that went in every direction. We had, and then you could sort of see out to the woods. And I spent a lot of time alone, being with the fruit trees and in the fields, and kind of noticing all the different kinds of spiders, and just really the articulation of the natural world. My parents were like, well, so we have something to tell you. This like, oh no, this kind of sense of foreboding. And basically they said, here's what's gonna happen. There's going to be, see that line right there? There's gonna be a highway that's going to go right there, right across the field there. And it was completely inconceivable to me how that could happen. My home was these fields. And that home suddenly had very demarcated boundaries. I love being at a party and like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I make collage. And they're like, so does my second grader. And they get so excited and they show me. And I actually love that anybody can do it. Like, it's cut and paste. And the process usually starts with an encounter with a printed history, book of images, photographs from archives, photographs from the newspaper. They're usually printed as documentary, reportage images that are usually objective, the sort of stand-in for a kind of truth. Images from the past inform how we're literally seeing the present and what the kind of structures we're seeing it through. There is this whole history of taking images in order to possess, invisibly embedded in mediated images. I think of it almost like a filter that we have without consciously having it on how we're seeing landscape. I grew up in Maine, right outside of Acadia National Park. My parents were doing a sort of light back to the land thing, so grow enough food for sustenance, but they both had jobs off the farm. The farmhouse I grew up in was taken by eminent domain so that a highway could actually be built as a shortcut for tourists going to Acadia National Park. The sudden discontinuity, the sudden line, the sudden cut, the sort of sudden sense that there was our land and then there was not our land. Questions about what the geography is we think we're looking at and what it actually is, and the kind of hierarchy of power relations that play out quite invisibly on landscape. Like the fact that people were rushing to an image. That really became kind of emotionally clear to me. The power is in the image. One of the other ruptures that occurred for me was that I was in Acadia National Park when I was 16, and I was hiking with a friend and she slipped and she fell and died. Then I went home and watched coverage of that on the news. And that division between looking at the mediated, televised image, which was just this bucolic landscape. It was a granite cliff. It was, a little bit of bushes. And the kind of personal experience I had, that gap became the thing that I needed to pay attention to. The coverage is not what happened. The coverage doesn't address experience. I found out years later that there had been actually a lobsterman that had been right nearby. It was this person that had called the Coast Guard. He couldn't come any closer to the shore because the cliffs are super dangerous. But that it had a huge impact on his life too. The absence of, we don't see that when we're looking at the news. You know, we can't, we just don't. And I think just like keeping in mind that that is the case, I mean, that's what the work is. Like the work is just the absence of a wide range of experiences. You know, how do we share things? Everything that we see on the news that's mediated represents a whole plethora of different kinds of first-person experiences that how do we access them? I mean, I think we all artists have an unusual, pathway through what it means to be an artist, what it means to be a visual artist. And then Hunter, it's like the proletariat of the art world. It was cheap, there were good spaces, there were really interesting faculty. It was just where I wanted to be. Also, I was coming from such a rural place that even just the sheer amount of stimulation took so much getting used to. It was like somebody taking me by the feet and hanging me upside down and shaking me out. It just had that feeling of like everything was falling. Everything that I knew, I was turned completely upside down. I received a Guggenheim in 2025, and the sort of acceptance letters come in the spring. That kind of grant, like the Guggenheim, feels like it just gives you this little platform, like just feeling like the direction I've been going in, which has been meandering and, on the margins oftentimes, is seen. I remember reading at one point that politically we solved the hole in the ozone problem quite quickly because it got into the cultural imagination because it had an image. It was a hole. And what we have now with the sort of temperature rising, and there's this sense of dissipation about like how we imagine heat building in the atmosphere. How do we imagine the atmosphere? And I think that there's no image to it. The project, the Atlas of Air project, they're quite small and they're very kind of simple in some ways. But if you look at them more closely, you can start seeing all the subjects that were cut out. Most of those spaces are actually air or they're sky. I'm really interested in the things that happen in the invisible, all the empty spaces, the parts of an image that don't actually get looked at as subject, as almost a way of taking back a kind of attention to our own way of looking at something or thinking about something or attending to something that is not dictated by the authority that I'm talking about. That's eminent domain. That's the highway across the continuous field. That's the kind of gap or the kind of question that I'm interested in. I was thinking about the idea that we have that artists work alone. That's not the case. That's never the case. Our imaginations are built by other people, by seeing other people, by having the sort of, it's about sharing experience. It's like, how do we do this? How do we think about this? Like, it gets made between two people. It's not like one person or the other person, but it's literally in the space between. Even the individual studio work, I feel like I'm collaborating with the person that took the photograph and the person that then drew the lines for the engraving and the printer, right? The bookseller, the person that decided to buy the book. The thing kind of happens between the engraver's hand and my hand, right? So there's this space between, just feels like an incredibly key place in terms of collaboration. I think that is ultimately what it is, right? It is about it's about sharing experience. It's like, how do we do this? How do we think about this? Like, how do we communicate?